Hi folks, welcome back to Canada's Boxing Channel. This is the video that I planned on making and then I got sidetracked talking about Riddick Bowe earlier. This one I'll release in a couple of days, I think. I like to do a historical one, then, the bunch of the more topical subjects and news, etc., then another historical one. I find that works best. It's sort of a good balance, I guess, between, the stuff that we're all interested in a sort of a news cycle, and the stuff that hopefully we're interested in forever because we're keen boxing fans. Now, as you all know, I was a child in the 60s, and so that's when I had my first exposure to boxing, and that's sort of the earliest memories, if you like, of, people like Henry Cooper and Joe Erskine and Jack Bodell, and of course the then Cassius Clay, and very, sort of hazy memories which were passed to me by my dad, so I'm not sure if they're real memories or secondhand of, Liston and Floyd Patterson and stuff like that. But by the 70s, of course, I was a sentient teenager. That's actually oxymoronic, I think. But anyhow, I was a teenager. And so my memories of the 1970s fighters are, very clear. In fact, as you get older, the memories from, many years ago are clearer than don't ask me what I had for breakfast kind of thing. Anyway, when I think of the 70s, of course, my mind, at the forefront of my mind is Ali, Frazier, Foreman, or some version thereof. But one of the fighters that I always liked, and I think we're in danger of sort of forgetting about, is Kenny Norton. And Ken Norton, of course, would have been, but for the fact that he rose to prominence in what is now called the golden era or golden age of heavyweight boxing, he would have been a world champion with an impressive reign. I mean, can you imagine Kenny Norton being brought back to fight in today's era? Wow, that would be something, wouldn't it? So it's a misfortune in many respects to have been a star in an era where everybody was really good. I often think you could take Ali, Foreman, Frazier, and Norton out of the 1970s, and you've still got an impressive era. So, but let's get to Kenny Norton's kind of career retrospective. This, of course, like all of them, is just a thumbnail sketch. Please read up on these great fighters. Please watch YouTube videos, read books, and inform yourself, because I'm just going to be scratching the surface of this exceptional fighter, who I can't call an all-time great, but was clearly a great fighter in a very, very tough era. So, Kenneth Howard Norton was his full name, commonly called Ken Norton or Kenny Norton, was born on August the 9th, 1943 in Jacksonville, Illinois. He grew up, he was a very talented athlete. He excelled in multiple sports, particularly football and track and field, or as people in the UK would say, athletics. He was so dominant in high school that in athletics that an Illinois state rule dubbed the Ken Norton rule limited athletes as to the number of events they could take part in. He was such a star, 100 meter, 200 meter, 400 meter hurdles, long jump, discus, shot put, javelin, you name it. He could compete and he could win in. So they introduced this rule to say, no, if you're like Kenny Norton, you've got to pick, 3 events or limited number of events. You can't just sweep the field. That's quite something, isn't it? After high school, Norton attended Northeast Missouri State University. It's now called Truman State University in honor of President Truman, on a football scholarship, but later left college and enlisted in the United States Marine Corps in 1963. Apparently, and I've heard him say this himself, that his dad said, if you're going to be a student in college, you've got to pay rent. And Kenny Norton thought, I can't afford to do that. So he joined the Marines, 1963. And it was in the Marines that Norton was introduced to boxing. Interestingly, he played football in the Marines at first. But when many of the football players were being shipped off to Vietnam, he thought, I don't want to go to Vietnam. And so he switched to boxing. And he won 3 all-Marine heavyweight championships. And the Marine Corps is not a place for, pillow-fisted individuals. So Kenny Norton, it was like what they say, a school of hard knocks. Boxing as an amateur in the United States Marine Corps back then, and probably today, is a very tough place to learn your trade. He had an amateur record of 24-2, and his success in the Marines as a boxer convinced him that he should turn professional and make this his trade upon his discharge in 1967. Ken Norton made his professional debut on November the 14th, 67, with a knockout victory over Grady Brazel. Over the next few years, Norton developed into a formidable heavyweight, and he was known for this unorthodox cross-arm defense, his athleticism, and his powerful physique. Now, I'm assuming that most people would have seen Kenny Norton fights on video, and his defense is really weird. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Fraser in a way. He's crouching down, his arms are crossed, and he's a come-forward fighter as well, right? And he's got a very impressive physique. He was sort of like one of the early bodybuilder type boxers. You think of someone like, Frank Bruno, or today Dubois or AJ. Well, Kenny Norton was one of those guys that had, six-pack, abs, muscles, at a time when, most heavyweight boxers didn't, right? Norton's breakthrough came on March the 31st, 1973. Wow, he shocked the world, absolutely, by defeating Muhammad Ali in San Diego, California. He broke Ali's jaw in the second round. It's a great right hand, and it broke Ali's jaw. The fight is notable because it went the distance. It was a 12-round fight. It went the distance, and Ali fought for 10 rounds with a broken jaw. Ali, who at this time when he was interviewed already had signs of the Parkinson's that ultimately led to his demise, said that he bit down on his gum shield, clenched his teeth like that, and then the interviewer said, "Well, did you know you had a broken jaw?" And Ali, in a flash of his old loquacious self, said, "No, you think I'm a fool?" So it's a great moment, and it can be found, I'm sure that interview can be found lots of places. It's actually found in the really good VHS DVD called Champions Forever, where Ali is being interviewed in the 1980s about this event. But yeah, he fought for 10 rounds with a broken jaw. But nevertheless, the fight was awarded to Ken Norton. And this was a bit of a shock because Ken Norton was not favored to beat Muhammad Ali. Ali was on the comeback path after losing the fight of the century, or many people just called it the fight, against Joe Frazier in 1971. And people thought that Ali would handle Norton, if not easily, but, very capably. Norton was not expected to be a major challenge. But Norton's awkward style, that cross-arm stuff and relentless pressure, gave Ali really big problems. Now, they had a rematch on September the 10th, 1973. And again, notice how people were fighting, every 5 or 6 months, right? It's not like in today's era. Ali narrowly avenged his loss by split decision. And, it's hard to say. Like, I've seen all 3. Maybe I should just talk about the third one, first of all. But a very strong argument can be made that Kenny Norton won 2 out of the 3, to be perfectly honest. The third and final fight took place between the two of them on September the 28th, 1976 at Yankee Stadium. This time Ali was the undisputed heavyweight champion. He was defending his WBA and WBC titles. Many observers thought that Norton deserved that win, but Ali was awarded a controversial at the time unanimous decision. And Norton was always pissed off, I think, certainly frustrated with that outcome. Some people could argue that Norton won all three. Most people would say Norton won 2 out of 3, but the record books show that of that trilogy, Ali won 2, fights number 2 and fights number 3, and Norton won fight number 1. I think Norton got hard done by. That's my personal opinion as a fan. And remember, Ali is my favorite heavyweight boxer of all time, right? So, and he's arguably number 1 or number 2 on a all-time list. So I'm a massive Muhammad Ali fan, right? And I still think that Norton won at least 2 out of 3. Your mileage may vary. I'll be interested to know what you think in the comments section. Following the second fight with Ali, so between the second and third fights, Norton faced George Foreman. He was the heavyweight champion of the world, and they fought in Caracas, Venezuela. Foreman was fresh off his destruction of Joe Frazier and was an overwhelming favorite. Norton tried to use his awkward style and his just being difficult to handle. But Foreman's power was just too much. Foreman was aggressive, relentless, and Foreman dropped Kenny Norton twice in the second round and forced a stoppage. Now, Foreman said, and I'm just going to read my notes here, he didn't want to fight Norton. He said Norton was a throwback to the old-style gladiators, and he was kind of afraid of Kenny Norton. Now, George Foreman is invariably complimentary about all the opponents he fought. George Foreman is the antithesis of a braggart. George Foreman lavishes praise on all the people he fought, but he says something that was kind of funny. He says, I stared at people, but I didn't want people to look down because they would see my knees trembling. Like, he's very self-deprecating, and George Foreman, in my view, is one of the all-time greats. And it's sometimes his self-deprecating sense of humor that endears us to him. Though George Foreman was an absolute killer in the ring, right? Now, Ali retired, at least temporarily. Of course, we know he came back in 1978. And the WBC awarded their heavyweight title to Norton due to his victory over Jimmy Young in a title eliminator. His first fight as champion was against Larry Holmes on June the 9th, 1978. And that's a war. A 15-round, great fight. Outstanding fight. Holmes narrowly won, split decision. Again, I think a strong argument can be made for Norton having won that one, but it's a pick'em kind of fight. And Larry Holmes, of course, is an all-time great. In some people's books, he's, I don't know, number 2, number 3. In other people's books, he's lower down. But Larry Holmes was a great fighter. Go back and look at the fight. It's a thoroughly enjoyable fight. Score it yourself. I think a case can be made for Kenny Norton having won that fight. But again, just one fan's opinion. Norton continued fighting. He lost against Ernie Shavers in 1979. He lost against Jerry Cooney in 1981. He beat Randall Cobb in 1980. He beat Jerry Quarry. Well, he beat Jerry Quarry actually in 75. And he beat Dwayne Bobbick in 77. So there's some other names, He retired. This is, of course, Kenny Norton, with a record of 42 wins, 33 by way of, 7 losses and 1 draw. If you look at the Ali fights and the Holmes fight, you could make a case for that being 44 wins and 5 losses. Anyways, it's still a very good record. He also, Kenny Norton, after retirement, was a bit of a movie star. He was in 2 somewhat controversial, you could almost call them blaxploitation movies. One was called Mandingo, and the follow-up was called Drum. He also had cameo roles in The A-Team and Knight Rider. So he had a movie and TV career. Of course, his natural athleticism, his physique made him a natural to play a certain type of role. Interestingly, Ken Norton said he never wanted to hurt anyone, and he sometimes went easy on fighters he saw he had hurt. He wanted not to really hurt anybody in the ring. He didn't want to get hurt himself. When you watch interviews of Kenny Norton, he comes across as a super likable guy. He was also incredibly popular with the ladies. Almost like a Wilt Chamberlain type of record in that department, I can assure you. So there we go. In 1986, Norton was severely injured in a car accident driving on the Santa Monica freeway. He went over an embankment, and as he says, he found the only tree that was there. He suffered a fractured skull and other serious injuries. He survived, but had long-term health issues. Muhammad Ali was apparently the 3rd person to visit him in hospital. Like, his wife was there, somebody else, like close friend, was there, and Muhammad Ali was there. When you see interviews of Ken Norton, you'll see Ken Norton's in a wheelchair, and Ken Norton sounds as though he's suffering the effects of a long boxing career. Please remember that that's not the case, that this was because of a tragic car accident, which foreshortened his career as a movie and TV person, but also undoubtedly led to his somewhat foreshortened life. As Kenny Norton passed away on September the 18th, 2013, aged 70, after battling a series of strokes. He's left behind a unique legacy as being one of the very few people to stop a relatively prime Muhammad Ali. And of course, it enhances Ali's reputation that Ali went for 10 rounds with a broken jaw. Kenny Norton was definitely one of the top fighters of the 1970s. Where would you put him? I don't know. He's behind Ali, he's behind Frazier, he's behind Foreman. Behind Holmes, but Holmes, of course, late 70s. Behind Shavers, maybe, because he lost against Shavers, but I don't know. Certainly one of the very top people. I like to think of him as number 4 or 5 in that golden era. Interestingly, he never fought Joe Frazier. He and Joe Frazier were buddies, and they chose not to fight each other. That would have been a great fight. Who would have won? Only the boxing gods know. I hope you've enjoyed this little career retrospective of Kenny Norton. Let me know where you think he fits. I tend to think he's slightly underrated because he's overshadowed by the legendary fighters of that generation. But if you go and have a look at his fights, he was exceptional. And if you listen to George Foreman was insistent. He wanted to get Kenny Norton out there early because he knew that Norton was a little bit of a slow starter, and he figured that if Norton got into gear, he would give George all he could handle. If you like this video, please like. If you're new to the channel or you are a frequent visitor but you've yet to hit the little subscribe button, please do subscribe. Most importantly, have a fabulous day, and don't forget these great fighters of yesteryear. Cheers. Thank you. See you next time.